Thanks for joining me for another entry into my trolling series. So happy to be with you and so happy to be diving right in and be talking about OC poetry on Reddit with you. We are going to do things a little bit different in this episode. So just to start out, I just had some wonderful conversations with the mods. And I really want to send my appreciation to them for their support. So just a quick mod shout out to OC Poetry Mods, Dog Tim, Nozzle, Seraphim Grim, Paradise Engineer, all the others. Thank you guys for taking an interest, and I'm really looking forward to having some great collaboration, getting your feedback, all those things. I also respect that, I come in sometimes and look at new and roll my eyes at some poems. I think there's some great poems we've discussed here. But tonight we're going to do things different. We're just going to look at the best. So I spent this week, when I had some free time, I would just roll into new, have a look around, and make a little list of poems that caught my eye. And then I reread those poems and kind of narrowed it down to 3 finalists, which we'll be looking at tonight. Each one of these poems I think is really interesting and worthy of perhaps a little deeper dive than we usually do. So without any further ado, let's start to our with one of our finalists here. This is Riley Walker with Blacksmithing. So as a departure from my usual practice, I'm not going to read these poems out loud. Some of them I think, that would just take more time. And you can pause the video right now and look at it if you want. But instead, I'm going to spend some time just discussing the poem by reading some of my comments that I'm going to be posting for Riley Walker here. So I'll say this is a classic topic, blacksmithing. This has been handled artfully by other poets, perhaps most famously exploited by Seamus Haney in his poem, The Forge. And I'll leave a link for that in my comment here. I think this poem captures some of that same spirit. This one is perhaps less explicitly in Ars Poetica. So in Ars Poetica is where one poem talks about the art of poetry itself. Horace wrote the first Ars Poetica. In our tradition, the Chinese have Ars Poeticas in theirs. Probably all poetry has some amount of Ars Poetica in it. This I saw this blacksmithing poem as very much a kind of Ars Poetica. And why do I think that? I think it tips its hand with strenuous trade, science and art, and of course at the end we have strength, wit, and grace. And the poet is enumerating things that make for a successful poem in their opinion. So we have these kind of well-aimed lines with little backswing to them, just like a good blacksmith would. The length is kind of the entire poem is very short, so it's kind of well forged, well honed. Of course, I think this poet could benefit from going and reading Haney, the more Haney they read, the better. But if they already know Haney well, that's okay. I mean, I'm not saying, hey, you obviously aren't schooled in Haney. I'm just saying it really rang a bell to me, and it could be an opportunity for anyone who's interested in poetry. In Haney's poem called The Forge, he writes how the blacksmith expends himself in shape and music, and he observes the specific technicalities of his trade, bringing the action into vivid life. And by comparison, we could say this poem is a little less evocative, right? So if you go and read the Haney poem that I link, you'll see that. Perhaps it's less photographic, less dramatic, less imaginative. But on the other hand, a poet like Seamus Haney comes around, every 100 years. Riley Walker's off to a great start. So I'm just going to pause the video and post my comment here, and then we'll get right back into things. Okay, great. So let's go on to the next. I would say that is one of the finalists, and now we have another finalist for you here in our next piece we will be discussing. And this is Desert Stars by Siamese Dreaming. I think people who float around OCPoetry probably have seen Sammy's Dreaming. I don't know if he's come up in my trolling series before, but Siamese Dreaming is we see a good amount of his work accumulating here. What did I respond to this poem about? What did I remark? What struck me? I think Desert Stars stood out to me because there's a lot of poetry on this subreddit about love poetry and perhaps about cannabis-themed love. So it's not the only poem that deals with kind of groping and longing and things like that. So because when there's a lot of competition, I think it's harder to distinguish yourself. It's tough to sell sand in a desert. I think this poem kind of does that. How? How does it do that? Well, the poem quickly and effectively draws in the reader with short, specific lines that balance lyrical and narrative needs, dumping us, quote, on a dusty orange roadside so we can drink in the desert stars. By achieving two objectives, both the narrative and the lyric, the poem also keeps the reader off balance and avoids anything too formulaic. Now, I thought some of the imagery stumbles to my ear, so you can see down here we have this foaming tide. I think that overdoes this kind of pubescent makeout theme. And that whole strophe, you could say, to my ears, is relatively weak compared to the strength of the rest of the poem. He or the poet, he or she or they expend an entire line on to soak. And we have this Whitman-esque idea to explore, kind of Whitman was big into expanding, exploring, and engaging and loving and just kind of this kind of American frontier of the imagination type thing. But this poem is a little bit abortive in that sense. It's not so Whitmanian in its explore. But despite that kind of weak strophe, the poem does recover its footing pretty quickly. And we get this fear my love will stick like tar, which is a fantastic image with this excellent tar. It's kind of sticking the landing of that line there with the tar. It's a monosyllable there, and it's a stress syllable. It's just bold. I think Siamese Dreaming is able to do what many other OC poets aren't, which is entertain. And I think when we lose sight of that we have to entertain, and not in this base, gross out way. A lot of the poems I've read over this week, they're just pure shock value or juvenilia. They're not really accomplished in any way. This poem is skilled in its balancing of different desires that the reader will have, and not just become kind of fan service. It challenges us a little bit. Okay, so those are my two finalists, and now we will go on to the most interesting, most ambitious, most original piece that I found all week. Now, again, a caveat, I didn't read everything on OCPoetry. I read what I could. I mean, there's a lot of poetry here, guys, just a huge amount. It's probably more work than any one person could do. But I do think this poem that I found does deserve to be singled out for attention. Why do I think that? Well, look, there's only one comment here, and it doesn't even have an upvote. So although I think this is the best poem I encountered, at least the most interesting in terms of technique, no one noticed it. No one cared. It's just shocking to me. It's shocking what the priorities, to a certain extent, are, as with any editorial system. It's shocking what falls through the cracks, and it's a darn shame for you stoners. I think he has some, or she has some chops, or they. What's going on? Yeah, this poem isn't perfect. It has some difficulties in it. But given time to think it over, and, like I said, I read a lot of poetry. This is the piece I kept coming back to. I kept asking, well, am I giving it its fair shake? And I kept reading it again and again. And ultimately, at times, it did dazzle. But the poem's strength is also at times its weakness. Its reliance on adjective and adjectival matter in general. So adjectives like revenant, Byzantine, eidolon, taciturn, clairvoyant, fervid. These are kind of these $100 descriptors that, in prose, especially in literary prose, I don't think you'd really have that much problem with them. But in poetry, we expect poets to be very choosy with their words, perhaps because of this tradition of meter where you have to make the poem fit some emphasis scheme of iambic pentameter or what have you. It's unusual to see Latinate polysyllabic words deployed kind of so freely. That's not to say that it doesn't happen. With the conquest of free verse in the 20th century, you saw some poets like William Carlos Williams who really kind of minimized the line a certain way. They stripped away the excess of it, making it this kind of finding that core musical elements of poetry. But other poets like Marianne Moore really pushed the other direction and wanted to expand what our ear would accept and what our ear would register as musical and give us more richness and more possibility as a result. This is a poet who definitely wants to go more in the Marianne Moore tradition, which I can appreciate. It's I don't have a preference between those two guys. I don't have like a horse in this race. But I do think the neglect of this poem is a little bit shocking. So at times the lyric precision here is just achingly accurate. Things like bottle cap daydreams, eidolon diesel, under hunted moonlight, bloomed Athanasia, the final whimper of a faded epoch. These all kind of land like an archer, champion archer, just hitting the target. I mean, so pinpoint. Note how the poem offers us hunted moonlight instead of haunted. And it dodges the cliche that so many OC poems fall into. They trip in these little, potholes. And they just get all their momentum derailed by cliche. And this poem refuses cliche. It dodges that cliche of haunted moonlight. But it offers this kind of echo of it, this innuendo. And it flirts with it in this way that's very satisfying and intriguing as a reader. I also find I tolerate the poem's failures. I find them heroic and daring. Some key lines do feel starched, approaching a kind of sclerotic kind of weakness, like summer blithe, beneath blackened walnut, Byzantine kept at the fringes. I mean, it's not evocative. It's not specific to me. But the key in a poem like this, with it's kind of T.S. Eliot, his wasteland is kind of all these shards of broken glass. Each shard has to be evocative. It has to be specific. It has to be vivid. You have to be able to see it. And where this poem loses me a little bit is where I can't see the image. I can't see cellophane bastard years or fervid Manhattan. I mean, I just don't exactly know what those are. I think Manhattan is like Manhattan Project, like a bomb or something like that. But again, the poet's taking risks. Then you got to appreciate that. Not risks of abortive risk, of just throwaway stuff, of just putting yourself out there and then flushing it. But real emotional, technical risks. Trying to push their technique and do something novel and interesting. So that's really all I have for you. I remember to comment on. I didn't comment on Desert Star, so I will go back and do that after the pause here. So just give me a moment, and we'll crank out those two things. All right. So that comment's in place. I did want to dignify this piece with one extra little ceremonial thing here. I think. As the most interesting piece that I encountered, we could give it a little something. What do you think, guys? We see what we can give. We're back in it here. And that's pretty much all I got for tonight. I had a lot of fun looking at poetry. And if I didn't get your poem, or you thought your poem was great and it didn't end up making my list, my apologies. I don't think I got to everything. Certainly not every single poem. So, if there's a poem you want me to handle and you want me to look at for next week, why don't you send me a DM? It's Mexman. And just drop that in, and I'll see if I can get to you. I did hear from a poet last week in tune with Notning. And I appreciate you circling back with me. That was really cool. You said yourself the revision is something you're still working on. So when you have something that you feel is final, just let me know, and I'll see if I can carve out some time to return to it. And that goes for everybody. I'm happy to engage and happy to include you in what I do here, since that's the whole idea. And sometimes some weeks I'll just troll and we'll see what we can find, and Batman will return. And some weeks maybe we'll do some more stuff like this, depending on what you guys like. And subscribe up. Comment up. Let me know what's up, guys. All right. Thanks for your time. Have a good one.